your article about the Elon just blew my mind. It was a piece of history that I had no idea about, and I wanted you to come on and share it with our viewers and listeners. Let's start in 1948 in Operation Paperclip.
Was a classified program that the U.S. intelligence services executed at the end of World War II and for years after. And it brought over at least 1,600 Nazi engineers, scientists, and others over to the United States to help fight the Cold War. And one of those Nazis was a guy named Wernher von Braun. And Wernher von Braun invented the V-2 rocket, which was otherwise known as the Vengeance rocket, and it terrorized London and Antwerp at the end of World War II. And this guy who created the V-2 rocket was part of Operation Paperclip, and he's relevant, it seems, to the richest man's life in ways that are surprising.
Yeah, so he comes to America, and while he's here, he writes a book called Mars Project in German at Fort Bliss, Texas, and publishes it in 1952 in English. Tell us about this science fiction novel that Wernher von Braun wrote.
Yes, well, it's a science fiction novel, but it's a very technical science fiction book. Mm-hmm. The whole last third of it is real technical drawings, etc.
It was written by a rocket scientist.
It was by one of the most famous rocket scientists in history.
Right.
He was a Nazi, but he was a legitimate rocket scientist. But he wrote this science fiction book called Mars Project. And in the book, there is a sort of figure on Earth who demands that we become multiplanetary, which is something Elon Musk says constantly, and that we have to colonize Mars. Well, it turns out when you get to Mars, there's a colony there already, and the leader. What's that?
In the novel, yeah.
In the novel, yes. We're not breaking news here. Yes, in the novel, you get there and there's a colony, and the leader of the colony is the Elan.
E-L-O-N.
E-L-O-N, the Elan. And so you may think, well, that's a strange coincidence. And, you know, I kind of heard this story and thought, you know, hey, maybe it's apocryphal. But then I went and started listening to Errol Musk, who is Elon Musk's father. And Errol Musk said out loud that as a child growing up in apartheid South Africa, he was taught these science fiction books, that he was a huge rocketry fan, and that he did in fact name his son after the Elan. So Elon Musk's father says this.
Elon Musk is named after the guy who ruled the colonies on Mars in the novel written by the Nazi rocket scientist Wernher von Braun. And to make it even weirder, those colonies did not live on the surface. Now, Elon has this company called the Boring Company that drills tunnels. Tell us about how the people lived on Mars in the novel.
Well, yes. There's also, do you remember Hyperloop?
Oh, yeah.
Hyperloop was...
Yeah. Well, tell people what it is. For a lot of people, you know, I remember. A lot of people don't know what we're talking about.
It was this project that was meant to create a high-speed railway of sorts between San Francisco and LA, and it was going to be in a tunnel, in a closed loop, and which is very reminiscent of the tunnels on Mars that Wernher von Braun said the Elan was in charge of.
Because people couldn't live on the surface because the surface is so hostile. So this entire society on Mars that they discovered when humans got there was living underground in these tunnels.
That's right, living underground in these tunnels, which tells you that, even back then, Werner von Braun knew that trying to colonize Mars was not going to happen unless somehow you were able to create a subterranean world, right?
Right.
One other thing that I think is important to understand is that this colony underground was a technocracy. So it was the Elan was basically the dictator, but his court of jesters, as it were, and people around him were all technocrats, engineers, and scientists, etc. Because he considered those people to be the only people who really should be involved in such, difficult.
It was kind of a benevolent dictatorship, essentially.
Exactly, and something to know about Elon Musk is that his maternal grandfather, Joshua Haldeman, was literally the leader of a pro-Hitler fascist movement in the 30s and 40s called Technocracy Inc. You can, this again, it's crazy. You can look it up. And what they wanted was a society that was ruled by technocrats, by engineers and scientists, etc.
Just like the society on Mars in this novel run by the Elon.
Exactly. One thing to know also about Elon Musk, to give you an idea of how sort of deep this goes with him, is that on his SEC filings for Tesla, he's not the CEO, he's not the CTO, he's the techno king of Tesla. Literally, that's his title, according to the Security and Exchange Commission. And the reason for that is because, that's how he sees the world. That's how he sees himself, as this sort of benevolent dictator, as you said. There's a lot of these billionaires have latched onto called long-termism. It's also called effective altruism. And it's basically the idea that billionaires are so much smarter and more powerful and capable than everyone else that they should make these decisions for us. They're going to make the hard choices and let the citizens just take their medicine. And unfortunately, for the rest of us, one of those imperatives for Elon Musk is literally going to, he doesn't care who gets hurt on Earth in the process.
Do you think it's that simple, that this guy is driven by this science fiction fantasy from a Nazi rocket scientist that his father, apparently his grandfather as well, and apparently he all kind of studied and bought into, and once you understand that, you understand his worldview?
I think it's a very good window into his worldview. His worldview is very complicated, just like a lot of these guys. What he's done is sort of molded it onto the Dark Enlightenment, which is a whole other ideology from Curtis Yarvin. I don't know if you've covered it or not.
In fact, he writes a blog on Substack.
Yes, he does. He started out.
It's hard reading.
He started out as Mencius Moldbug, and his first few articles were about how democracy is basically a liberal conspiracy theory and should go away.
By the way, we should note that this is a guy who had a major influence on J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, David Sachs. All these guys are Mark Andreessen. They all have latched onto this ideology to some
kind of their philosopher king,
exactly,
to reports.
And they've molded it. Elon Musk has molded it into his sort of Mars first worldview, as it were. The one other sort of way to think about what's going on is, how Trump is threatening what? Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Panama. They've got Bitcoin stuff going on in Honduras and El Salvador. These guys want to create a North American empire, right? They want to create a gas station basically for Elon Musk's rockets, right? The size of the continent. And they really do believe that they are so much more superior than, the rubes and the poors, that they should be making those decisions for us. And democracy is really a very inconvenient, side effect.
Is this philosophy, and my apologies, we only have 45 seconds, so we hit a hard break here, but is this kind of like the during the Cold War, where you had the spheres of influence? You had the Soviets, you had the Americans, you had the Chinese.
Well, absolutely. What they follow Alexander Dugin, and without going too far into it,
Putin's philosophy.
His whole idea is that this is all globalism, right? And so what they want to do is break up this unipolar world into different poles. And one of those poles would be North America. One would be Eurasia, with Moscow as the third Rome, and the other would be China and Taiwan. And that's basically how they've decided to carve up the plan.
And ultimately probably South Korea and Japan get subsumed into that.
Exactly.
Yeah, remarkable stuff. Jim, you're doing just amazing work, and I love your newsletter. I encourage everybody to check it out. It's mind-war.com is the website. Or you can just go over to substack.com and plug in Mind War. Jim Stewartson writes this. He's also Jim-Stewartson over on Blue Sky. Jim, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Great talking to you. Thank you.